Hi everyone, and welcome back to Research Methods and the second introduction, and this time to topic 2. I've called this one a little bit different to how it is in the study guide. Research approaches, research paradigms, research traditions, and methodologies. I guess to expand out the possibilities that we have the words available to us to describe our research this week. So I'll just launch into it. I guess the story so far is that we've talked about research at university and its aim to develop new knowledge, and that new knowledge and its process of production is documented in some form, either as a thesis or creative work and exegesis. And so what we're going to sort of cover this week in a way is the beginnings of thinking about how our thesis, our claims to new knowledge are going to be judged. And that's going to be in two ways. I guess in the first instance, it's going to be in terms of the quality of your outputs, that creative work, that exegesis, that thesis. The other thing is going to be around the rigour of your research approach and methodology that produce those outputs. And so there's those two factors that you're balancing, I guess, and that we're going to talk a little bit more this week about that second aspect. That is, start to unpack this idea of a research approach or methodology and the way we're going to produce knowledge through research. So, one of the things, I guess the key question for today is this question of, well, how do I locate my research? Because that's the first thing that you're going to be doing as in terms of documenting your research and informing your reader, your examiner, whoever's reading your research, about what type of research it is. This is a challenging topic. It's probably the most challenging topic in research methods. It comes in week 2 and it gets easier from this point on. So what I'm going to say about that is that it will be a topic that will probably take us all session to really work through in detail. And in fact, it might be something that continually unfolds and that you continually develop understandings about as you're doing your thesis itself. So, for that reason, I say that if you're in doubt about this, and there's going to be doubt about this for you, in general there will be, then make a tactical decision. That is, inform yourself as well as you can about these ideas of research methodology, paradigms, traditions, approaches, all those sorts of things. And then make a decision and proceed, and make it the decision as best you can. And we can talk through these issues as we go through the session. But I guess in the initial instance, it's just about, okay, saying, I think this is the thing, this is the approach, this is the paradigm, this is the tradition. I'll use all those 3 words. In the end, you might only use one that suits me best and suits my research best. So really, it's not about me suiting me best so much as suiting my research best, because that's what we're focused on, this research process, this research that we're doing. So, as I probably said too often last week, we're in the knowledge construction business. That's what we're doing in our university studies and in university research. We're in the business of constructing new understandings, and so in doing that, we want to construct projects or we construct research processes that will create those new understandings. I guess for the community of scholars that we're becoming part of in this process, that they will see it as a well-constructed process for developing those new understandings. So research methods, I guess, in that sense, is about being able to make your construction methods explicit, being able to write about them clearly, and demonstrating that your research process, that your construction is a well-made one. So in that research construction process, the process that we're going to outline, typically it's in a methodology chapter, but it mightn't be so clear-cut in your particular process, your particular document. We're going to have an alignment between the object of our research, the thing that we're looking at, that thing that we're searching about, searching for, I guess, the topic generally in which that object of research is located, the methodology that we're using to do the search, to find out something about this object of research that answers the question, and the research output, that is, the form in which we finally produce our thesis or our creative work and exegesis. So all those things in an ideal world, in an ideal research process, will be aligned and fit neatly, and therefore will read as a seamless whole. That your object of research, the question that you have about it, the method that you use to answer the question, and the way you go about describing your research journey to answer that question are all aligned and quite neatly so. The topic and research question, I guess, to expand on that a little bit, if we were to use the metaphor of the topic that we're interested in being like a map, an area of research, then the question guides us through that area. So I might be interested in uranium mining protests in the 1970s as a topic for my research, but that's a large topic to investigate. What is it that I really want to know about that? And what I want to know about that is going to be encapsulated in a question. Who were the protesters in the 1970s anti-uranium mining movement? And so that question starts to give me a bit of a guiding way. It guides my way through the actual topic. There's so much to know about the topic, but I want to know one specific thing about that. It defines my investigation, gives me, I've got some boundaries, and the question provides me with some direction. And I guess the research question is always in process for us. We're going to be continually clarifying it. It may be that question is far too broad. In fact, what I'm interested in is that movement in Australia. Maybe it's that movement in Sydney in the 1970s. Maybe it's that movement and a particular organisation in the 1970s, something that might narrow my scope down to something manageable, something that I can do in the time frame I'm allotted. My reading is going to give me ideas about that. It might guide me to which organisation I might choose, for example, what's been done before, what's known, how I might position my research in relation to that. So I guess that reading informs our question and might further clarify it. And as we read, I guess we're going to also have ideas about the methods that we might use. Will we use interviews? Will I use newspaper reports? Will I use television coverage? So many different ways, all helping me refine my research question so that it becomes very specific. So I might be interested, just as an example, and I'm going to make this all up, in the People for Nuclear Disarmament organisation who operated in Sydney in the 1970s, and I'm interested in who those people were and what their motivations were as portrayed through print media coverage. Okay, so I'll construct a question around that. And, there could be a number of ways of thinking about that. But anyway, I've got myself a question that I'm going to go on with here. You'll notice that it's probably largely a descriptive question, although I guess motivations, interesting to think about motivations because they're quite complex things, aren't they? Can we actually know that from a newspaper article? There's going to be so many questions that throws up, and might refine my question further as I think more and more about these different things. But out of this, I'm going to have some good ideas of what I want to search for when I do my literature search, just as an example. So in that way, the research question is at the heart of our project because it contains the object of the research. It gives me some sense of what my methods are going to be, what my methodology is largely, and what sort of research output I might produce. So clearly this could well be a straight thesis, but maybe it's useful to have some imagery in there as well, some actual newspaper articles. So, photographs of people, I don't know, could be a range of things there. But whatever it is, my research problem or my research question is going to, in a way, dictate my methods, my methodology. I like this idea of going back, as I've done before in the previous video, just to have a look at this word method, because that's what we're talking about today. It goes back to a ancient Greek hodos, the path or the way. Meta hodos sort of being, if you like, the study of paths and ways, the development of a path or a way. And as Bruno Latour reminds us, we use these words and they feel really complex and complicated. Research methods, what's that? But he says, be kindly reminded that where to travel and what's worth seeing there is nothing but saying in plain English what is usually said under the pompous Greek name of method, or even worse, methodology. So our method is sort of telling us, as we've been sort of using this map metaphor, where we're going to travel, also, I guess, how we're going to travel, and what are the types of things that we're going to look for as we travel. So that's our method. Our method is going to help us generate data. It's going to help us think about how we're going to analyse that data. It's going to help us think about, if we're creative researchers, the type of practice that we might undertake, what's appropriate for the sort of things and topics that we're interested in engaging with in that practice, and the types of outputs that might be appropriate to that, as well as how we might examine why we've done all this now in an exegesis. So, there's a whole range of things here, but I guess methods help us understand what it is we're doing, what we're looking for, the way we're going about something. Now, as I've been going through this, I've been using a whole range of terms, and I don't know that I've always been using them consistently. So I'm going to attempt to be a bit more consistent about this. But one of the things I'd say as I do this is that terms in research methods, terms in research methodology aren't used consistently. And so throughout this journey of describing your research, one of the things to bear in mind is that there will be inconsistencies between authors, and maybe even by authors, as they use terms differently, unconsciously differently, sometimes intentionally differently. I doubt it, probably not, unless their ideas have changed. But there's a range of variation here, and so that earlier thing that I said about being tactical in this, choosing something that makes sense to you, using that, and not being too wrapped up in the language of research methodologies themselves is important, because it's a whole realm of study in itself, which could be the focus of a thesis. So you don't want to do that. You just want to use this stuff as a tool. And so here is one set of ways of understanding this landscape of research terminology. And I'm going to draw on Zena O'Leary's book here, and with a few modifications. Research methodology, let's have a look at that one. There's two ways of thinking about research methodology. One is as the study of methods. That is, you pick up a research methodology textbook, and in that textbook you will find a whole lot of different methods described. So the study of methods, their categorization, their appropriate use, how to go about them, the pitfalls, the limitations, all of that type of stuff, I guess, is the study of methods and research methodology. But that's not how we talk about it really when we, for example, have a chapter in a thesis or exegesis called methodology. What we mean in that sense is, what is my particular research framework? What is my methodology? So that's going to be comprised of a number of things. First of all is the paradigm which underlies our research, which positions our research within the full spectrum of research, starting maybe at one end with scientific research methods, the scientific method, objective data collection, all that type of stuff, right through, and let's put it at the other end of the spectrum, not saying it's the opposite, but a different way of knowing, creative research, as, for example, a musician or a sound artist or a dancer. So there's a spectrum, and in between there's a whole range of other things. The idea of a paradigm is to divide that complete spectrum up into different types of research. And so we can identify ourselves within a particular research paradigm. It's not actually that clear-cut. It would be nice if it was, and it's not. Terms vary, all sorts of things. Some people prefer the term research tradition or research approach. So again, this is going to be one of those things where we choose something that has meaning for us and we call it quits. We reference it. We have some support from, established authors, and we move on. Might change it later on, but that's okay. The next thing is our specific research methodology. So what is my methodology? And I'm going to say I'm a practice-based painter, or I'm a practice-based researcher, and in that I'm a painter. Or I might say I am a social work researcher who is going to use grounded theory. There are two ways we might think about this. That'll do. And we may also have a theoretical stance that's part of this research framework. That is, my theoretical stance might be that I come from a feminist perspective, or I'm a critical race theorist, or come this from a queer theory perspective, or trans theory, or any of those theoretical perspectives. Could be class. I'm a Marxist or a Marxian researcher. All those sorts of theoretical stances which might inform where we're coming from, say something about our values generally, a part of our theoretical stance and orientation towards our particular subject areas. Important because it is a guide towards how we do our research, how we approach our research. We're coming from a particular direction. So that gives us a research framework. Our methods are the techniques we use to collect our data. So I might be an interviewer. I might actually use, let's say I'm going to use semi-structured interviews. But anyway, I might be a drawer. I might be a jazz musician and I'm going to transcribe the work of exemplar jazz musicians in my field and improvise from what I learn from those transcripts. I'm going to write a novella. All of these are different methods, if you like. Excuse my email. That's how I sort of talk about my method. The techniques I'm going to use to collect data, and think here about data in a really wide sense. Because for some of us data will make sense, and for some of us we'll have to do a little bit of the translation to think, what is the data? What is the information I'm gathering about the world out there? I might be gathering data through drawing, through engaging in some creative process. So there we go. The tools that we use to conduct our research might be an interview guide. So I'm doing semi-structured interviews and I've got a guide as to the questions that I'm going to ask. I might be a drawer and I use charcoal on bark. In my transcription and improvisation, I might use as a tool a music analysis table or an iPad. I'm not sure. All sorts of different ways. But that's the types of things, the tools that we use to conduct our research. And our methodological design is all of the above. It's our framework, it's our methods, it's our tools, the whole kit and caboodle. Tells us something about how we've designed our research process. So, that's some research terminology. It's, I guess, about how we're going about our work. It may also include something about analysis, and some of those tools might be about analysis. We've collected the data, but we might be also interested in describing how we're going to analyse that data, which will come out of our research methods as well. So we want to include that type of thing in there. So now I guess the next thing is to start thinking about some of those terms. And I'm going to talk about research paradigms now because I guess this is sort of where it all started. Where it all started is with the social sciences, and in particular the social sciences that were engaged in qualitative research, trying to explain to people who thought that the only things that count in the world are numbers, why their particular research is valid, how it's valid, justifications for validity. And so research paradigms, I guess, started to be developed in the social sciences to not only define the different types of research that are done in the world, but to explain how that research can be valid in producing knowledge about the world. And those social scientists who did that type of paradigm work were predominantly qualitative researchers. But what they didn't do was they weren't creative researchers. They left that bit out because that was outside their field of vision. So when creative researchers have come into the mix later on, the creative writers, the artists, the musicians, the dancers, the performers, the dramatists, they then have had to extend this thing, this whole paradigmatic view of the world, of research, in new ways, which are still emerging. So that's why it's not always easy to characterise research up that end of the spectrum, because it's still under development, people are still thinking about it. But we're going to give it a go. One of the ways of thinking about this, I guess, is in the article or the excerpt I have put in the readings for Hard Times, which isn't sort of in the formal set of readings, if you like, but sitting there off to the side. I haven't got there yet. It's sort of a late addition to the readings. But I guess what strikes me about this introductory section to Hard Times is the, if you like, the contest between two different worldviews, between the worldview of someone like Thomas Gradgrind, who's interested in fact, and Sissy Jupe, for whom Thomas Gradgrind says is more in the world of fancy. And so I just introduced this reading just to give us a little bit of an example of how we might think about different worldviews, paradigms we can think of as different worldviews. Those worldviews can be broken up into a range of factors, and then words like ontology, epistemology, axiology come into the description of those worldviews, the description of those paradigms. So have a look at Hard Times, have a read of it, and think about this. How would you describe and contrast the worlds in which Thomas Gradgrind and Sissy Jupe dwell? This world in which they dwell is part of their worldview. So have a look at that. In the reading by Sean Wilson, he talks about paradigms in terms of the beliefs that guide our actions as researchers. So this isn't our worldview all the time. It's our worldview as a researcher on our particular project. Because remembering that the type of research we do, the question that we have, will, in a way, unfold onto a particular research paradigm. If I'm asking something about the composition of the fabric of a chair, then I'm asking, I guess, a chemical analysis type of question, perhaps, a materials analysis type of question, and I'm going to do some, I guess I could do some chemical testing, I could do some fabric analysis, and I'll probably use a bit of a scientific method to do that. But if I'm interested in the use of the fabric in the design of the chair, it's quite a different question. And we're going to come at that with a whole different set of beliefs, if you like, or research beliefs around that. And so it's the questions that we're asking about the object of our research that will guide our actions as researchers. They put a frame around what our image of research is for this particular research process. There's going to be something in there about ontology, in this particular way of framing our image of research, of the worldview, I guess, of that this particular research process requires. The view of reality for the research process. This is really abstract stuff, I know, but we'll come back to it. The epistemology, how do we get to know that type of reality? So if my reality is that there is a objective world out there of fabric on chairs, then how I'm going to get to know this reality is through some type of scientific method. There's a way of knowing that goes with that type of understanding of reality. And I'm going to have a methodology that surrounds that comes out of that. what we're going to investigate, how we're going to investigate it, what and how to measure and assess how we do that. That is, how do I find out more about this reality? That's our methodology. That's the how. Axiology, I guess, is the values and ethics that we bring to research. What's worth finding out about? How is it ethical to go about gaining knowledge? What will the knowledge be used for? All those sorts of questions are axiological questions. And I guess then we're going to have some criteria for validity as well. How will others judge that this knowledge that we've gained is valid? And that's going to, again, depend on what it is we're researching, how we're researching, the research tradition that we're within. So that's those are the things that are part and parcel of the research paradigm. So there's a range of research paradigms categorised according to ontology, epistemology, methodology and validity. And here's a table of some, which I'd like to discuss maybe in the Collaborate sessions or in class this week, because I think there's a lot to go through here. You'll notice I've used 4 particular types here: the positivist paradigm, the interpretivist, the critical, and the creative arts or performative paradigm. There are 4 types of ways of describing, categorising the spectrum of research that's possible. But they're not the only 4 ways. There are other ways of describing this as well that you will come across. And so, again, this is about choosing something that makes meaning for us, choosing the work of a particular author, locating ourselves because it makes sense to us and to our research, and moving on. Because we don't want to get tangled up in a whole study of paradigms and stuff. We want to do our research, but we want to be able to describe our research well using this type of language. So I guess there are benefits to using the idea of research paradigms because they clarify our research stance, they indicate appropriate methods that we might use, they bring awareness to how our research is situated and can position it for others. I guess the issues around this is that there's a science of methodologies and an easy way of dividing things up, and of course there's no easy way of dividing up how we come to know the world around us, so there's debate and conflict around that. And so therefore nomenclature and definitions can vary. And our research isn't always as neat as paradigms might suggest it should be. So in that way, I guess there's a range of issues that that we need to deal with as we're getting sort of working through this stuff. And remember, we haven't even got to those other levels of research methodology which we talked about earlier as part of being part of our research framework. So if we've reached a post-paradigmatic age, perhaps it's better to consider ourselves part of a research tradition, and that might be one way out of this. Paradigms might be useful to us as well. We're going to have a discussion about that. We might also talk about a research approach. Maybe that's another way to come at this that dispenses with all this sort of knowledge. But I guess these are the things that we can open up for discussion as we go through this week. So I guess what I could be asking you to think about as you come to class this week is, what do you think your research paradigm or tradition might be? Why is this relevant to your research? Why do you locate yourself in this way? And think through that type of topic. So I think that's as much as I wanted to talk about in this introduction. As always, it's quite a lot, and it's complex stuff. And I've probably not always been so clear in this video as I'd like to be, but it gives you a bit of a sense of the area in which we're entering this week as far as describing research methods and our research methodologies. And so let's see if we can get things clearer in class this week and through our reading. So all the best with it. As I say, it's a challenging week. It's going to be the hardest week, I think, intellectually, and we'll find our way through it, because in the end we always do. That's what we're going to do.